When my friend Benjamin told me that he had sold the house my father had left me for $660,000, I was completely taken aback. He called from the hospital with a stunning happiness in his voice as he broke the news. To my further surprise, he disclosed that he was taking a trip with his mistress. I found the whole situation to be utterly ridiculous, and I found it difficult to comprehend Benjamin's reasoning behind making such a decision about a place that was so meaningful to me. In addition, he said nonchalantly that he planned to move away from his family, which included his daughter Nancy. I was profoundly offended by Benjamin's lack of concern for his daughter, about whom he grumbled that she was growing increasingly conceited and bothersome. I was furious at his callous remarks about his child. I was angry and disbelieving at the same time as I struggled to process the confusing news of the property sale and his plans to leave his family. I thought I would lose my sense of reality. I had to intervene to prevent Benjamin from recklessly selling the house. I'm Carol, a 39-year-old stay-at-home mom. My life has become more and more difficult with my spouse Benjamin and our 9-year-old daughter Nancy. A year or so of persistent suspicions about Benjamin's infidelity have contributed to the rising discord in the marriage. His habits, such as going out late at bars, coming home smelling odd, and purchasing pricey gifts that weren't for me, alarmed me even though I didn't have any concrete evidence. However, I've been too afraid to approach him about his potential affair, which has prevented me from acting decisively. When I think back on our relationship, the Benjamin I fell in love with 11 years ago comes to me. I was first drawn to him by his warmth and sincerity, and our marriage began happily. But things really started to go south when Nancy turned 1. Being a full-time homemaker, parenting proved to be more demanding, and I required Benjamin's assistance with meals and showers. He felt irritated as these duties became commonplace and eventually stopped being an active dad. He started to argue that since I was a stay-at-home mother, I should be responsible for taking care of the kids. Benjamin was always making bitter comments, and he would frequently withdraw into our bedroom and leave Nancy and me alone. There was less of him interacting with Nancy as he grew more distant. He dismissed her, saying he was too busy and that playing was my job, even on his days off. Nancy was often reprimanded by Benjamin for crying, and he blamed my parenting for any problems that arose rather than taking into account her feelings. We would frequently withdraw to our room and play alone in order to shield Nancy from his hurtful remarks. It hurts to witness how our once content marriage has descended into such tension and turmoil, with me having to deal with these issues mainly on my own. Living with my daughter Nancy meant that I rarely had time for me, even when I felt like I needed some alone time for hobbies like reading or watching movies. Benjamin was frequently pursuing his love of auto racing in the meantime. We were dependent on his salary, so even though it felt unjust, I was hesitant to express my displeasure. Throughout the 9 years of our marriage, this feeling of helplessness and irritation had been steadily increasing. Benjamin's harsh language and lack of interest in parenting had become distressingly common. It was a far cry from the considerate and loving man I had married. Despite these difficulties, I realized that we had to keep things stable for Nancy's sake, because our income was reliant on Benjamin's work. Nancy complimented my artistic abilities and suggested I sketch my career one afternoon while we were painting together. Nancy, in contrast to my own restrained disposition, had developed into a straightforward, joyful, and honest girl, even in the face of Benjamin's frequent dismissive attitude. Seeing her succeed in school, gain popularity among her peers, and become a teacher's favorite was encouraging. Her praise for my drawings gave me more self-assurance and pride, since it showed me how much she appreciated and noticed the work I had put into them. Her optimism, which shone light on our family's difficult dynamics, was something I treasured. Nancy's ability to make me grin gave me the strength to tackle the recurring difficulties. But our home life took a usual turn for the worse that evening. After drinking, Benjamin passed out in the living room. His drinking had grown more and more concerning. A piece of paper dropped out as I was succeeding in taking off his jacket. It was a motel receipt, an unequivocal and devastating affirmation of my long-held concerns regarding his adultery. "Hide my inner agony, please." I slipped the receipt onto a shelf and went to bed, wondering how I would tell Benjamin what I had discovered the following morning. I was left alone with my thoughts in the middle of my daily tasks when Benjamin, who was barely sober, departed the home before Nancy went to school. It became more and more difficult to keep up the facade of a happy relationship or to deny the truth when the motel receipt was discovered. Although I knew something needed to happen, I was intimidated by the road ahead. I had to talk to Benjamin immediately, expecting an admission, maybe an apology. Over the next few days, as I was buried in these thoughts, I was startled out of my meditation by the abrupt vibration of my smartphone. I became anxious when I saw a strange number flash on screen. The caller identified themselves as a member of the General Hospital personnel when I reluctantly answered. They told me that Benjamin had been sent to the emergency department in a hurry and was currently having surgery to treat a serious kidney condition. Benjamin's condition was grave, the doctor indicated, and a kidney transplant might be necessary. I listened as the doctor explained the seriousness of the surgery and the requirement for a transplant, feeling overwhelmed by this abrupt turn in our lives. I felt myself not wanting to lose Benjamin that night, even if his mockery and infidelity had hurt me. While I thought about the scary prospect of his operation, I held on to the optimism that he would recover. The hunt for a prospective kidney donor got underway over time. I was, rather unexpectedly, the ideal fit. Our story took on a deeper complexity when it became clear that, despite our tense relationship, I could save Benjamin. Benjamin's parents became involved as well, adding to the complexity of the situation. Though they were elderly, they were quite concerned. I had to balance the chance of a restored relationship through this life-saving act against our tumultuous past when deciding whether or not to donate a kidney. Despite my imperfect health, Benjamin had no siblings, and our matched blood types made me the most appropriate donor. Admittedly, I had serious reservations about undergoing the surgery. However, the overriding importance of preserving Benjamin's life helped me overcome these hesitations. Recognizing the irreplaceable value of his presence, I decided to proceed as his kidney donor. When I discussed Benjamin's condition and our upcoming surgery with Nancy, she responded with understanding and encouragement. She stayed with my in-laws during my hospitalization. Despite their health issues, they were able to care for her. Nancy enjoyed a close bond with her grandparents, and knowing she was in good hands provided me with immense relief. With that peace of mind, I underwent the kidney transplant surgery, which surprisingly was completed more quickly than I had anticipated. I spent about a week in the hospital while Benjamin needed 8 days to recover. Thankfully, there were no complications, and both of our recoveries proceeded smoothly. Just before I was due to be discharged, my phone rang, sending a shiver down my spine. I answered the call, bracing myself for another unexpected twist. As I spoke to Benjamin, who had just received my kidney, I expected words of thanks for the life-saving donation and asked about his recovery. But the conversation took a shocking turn. In an unsettlingly cheerful tone, he revealed that he had sold our house for $660,000 and was planning a trip with his mistress. I was stunned by the news. It felt like a lightning strike. That house wasn't just any property. It was a cherished inheritance from my father, now thoughtlessly sold off. Benjamin's brazen announcement that he also had a mistress added another layer of shock. In my state of disbelief, I asked about our daughter's welfare, only to be met with his cold indifference. He said he didn't care and was planning to leave her behind. This revelation left me both enraged and appalled. The idea that he would sell the house and abandon his daughter was incomprehensible. Determined to take action, I realized I had to prevent Benjamin from rashly giving up our home. As our call ended abruptly, I was left in a whirlwind of emotions, grappling with his shocking decisions and figuring out how to protect our home and Nancy's future. Struggling to grasp the reality of Benjamin selling our house while he was still in the hospital, the stress worsened my condition, leading to an extended hospital stay. Feeling helpless and distressed, I lay in the hospital bed for days, pondering my next moves. My first instinct was to reach out to Nancy. Without the house, we would have nowhere to live. Despite my anger at Benjamin for his audacious actions and his affair, my primary concern was for Nancy's well-being. I decided to call her at my in-laws' house, where she answered the phone. I anxiously asked Nancy how she was coping and if she felt lonely, especially with the news of our house being sold by her dad. Her response was unexpectedly reassuring. She calmly informed me that she had managed to handle the situation, explaining that her dad had instructed his mistress to sell the house. Nancy's mature handling of this surprising turn of events left me both surprised and proud. She reassured me that everything was fine and expressed her gratitude for my concern. Encouraged by Nancy's composed demeanor, I felt a bit of peace settle within me. However, curiosity about what was currently happening with Benjamin and his mistress lingered. Reminding myself of the need for rest, I allowed sleep to take over. After 4 days of recovery, I was discharged from the hospital and made my way to my in-laws' house. Upon arrival, Nancy greeted me with joy, and my mother-in-law welcomed me back with a gentle smile, expressing her happiness. In contrast, my father-in-law's expression was grim as he apologized for Benjamin's actions. I was baffled at how Benjamin could stray so far from the values instilled by his wonderful parents. Despite their apologies, I acknowledged that perhaps I should have spoken up sooner. As we talked, my in-laws expressed their determination not to let Benjamin have his way. Intrigued and somewhat anxious, Nancy and I decided to head home. However, on our way, we encountered an unexpected scene in front of a realtor's office. There, we saw a disheveled Benjamin and an unknown woman, presumably his mistress, engaged in a heated argument. Benjamin, dressed in sweatpants and with unkempt hair, appeared visibly distressed. His mistress, wearing a short skirt and only one high heel, looked frustrated as she complained about the house not being sold and a canceled purchase deal of $660,000. The chaotic scene unfolded before us, adding another layer of complexity to our already tumultuous situation. Benjamin's angry gestures and his mistress's loud complaints drew shocked looks from passersby. Nancy and I, equally surprised, approached them seeking an explanation. Upon questioning Benjamin about his actions, he and his mistress were visibly taken aback, gasping in surprise. Accusations flew immediately, with Benjamin suggesting that I must have talked the buyer out of the deal. Dismissing their baseless claims and instinctively protecting Nancy behind me, I stood firm, ready to address the mess that had unfolded. I stood firm against their accusations, deeply troubled by the unfolding drama. The realtor, caught in the middle of this chaos, reacted with disbelief upon discovering that I was Benjamin's wife. The cancellation of the house purchase had thrown a wrench in their plans. Benjamin, pointing at his mistress, admitted he still had debts from the money he had lavishly spent on her. It slowly dawned on me that Benjamin intended to sell the house to settle these debts and secure a new place for them both. The realization washed over me like a harsh wave. Benjamin knew full well that the house was a precious inheritance from my father, and yet he was willing to disregard Nancy and me in his scheme to seize my most valuable asset. My anger surged as I confronted him. Despite the tense situation, he continued to hurl insults, displaying a shocking lack of decency. I challenged his audacity to sell my house without my consent, emphasizing that I was the rightful owner. My anger grew as I questioned whether he had gone as far as forging documents to facilitate the sale. Subsequently, I disclosed an unexpected development. Benjamin had been disparaging the alleged purchasers of the house without realizing that they were his parents. Nancy had told my in-laws about Benjamin's wrongdoings, so she was the one who broke the news to them. My in-laws, furious at their son's behavior, had made the decision to intervene and defend their cherished granddaughter as well as their daughter-in-law. Nancy firmly went up to tell us that her grandparents were aware of the house's importance to us and were against its quick sale. They had cleverly feigned to be the first people to purchase the house. Desperate and defeated, Benjamin let out a foul laugh and yelled at Nancy and her grandparents upon discovering this falsehood. But Nancy did not lose her composure in the face of his verbal abuse. I responded by taking a piece of paper out of my backpack and shoving it under Benjamin's nose, prepared to present him with proof. The complicated dynamics of families and the extent people will go to in order to protect those they love were brought to light by the drama that was developing. I swung the divorce papers around and said with determination, "I want a divorce." Benjamin scoffed and snorted, not understanding the seriousness of the issue and making me wonder if I could survive without him. I was unmoved by his haughtiness and determined to refute his incorrect beliefs. I sat back and told Benjamin that I had a plan, determined to break through his delusions. "Never fear," I said. "I'm going to receive a lifetime present from your parents," and revealed that his parents were stepping in to make sure Nancy and I would be taken care of, in spite of everything. This decision was about more than just dissolving a marriage. It was about ensuring Nancy and I would have a secure future. I recently announced that I had received a sizable pre-in. Benjamin and his mistress were clearly taken aback by the inheritance gift. I clarified that my in-laws made the decision to give me a portion of their money as soon as possible due to their health concerns. My in-laws made it apparent that they felt I deserved the generosity more, especially because I had given them a treasured granddaughter than Benjamin, who I had initially assumed may benefit from it. They were disappointed with Benjamin because, despite their having facilitated a life-saving organ donation, he had not shown gratitude. I accepted the present with gratitude, feeling lucky to have received such kindness. Benjamin was obviously distressed by this choice. He appeared pale and uneasy. He was fiercely against the agreement, calling it unethical and dishonest, and he even threatened to sue. But I calmly explained that our parents had made a completely logical decision and that his current predicament was the result of his financial irresponsibility. I also openly questioned if he could really afford the legal fees, given his track record of reckless spending. I confronted him more directly and told him that I was going to demand every penny because of child support and emotional pain. I told him quite bluntly that I would do whatever it took to make sure he did what he had to do. Benjamin apologized profusely, but it was obvious that it was too late. He was overcome with regret. I made it clear to him that I would not back down from getting even for the abuse and disregard he had given me and our daughter Nancy. A realtor who had witnessed the entire discussion thanked me for managing the unpleasant issue well as Benjamin and his mistress swiftly departed the area. Even though it was tense, the settlement was essential to maintaining accountability and respect within our family. Once any misconceptions had been resolved, I was prepared to welcome a fresh start. Nancy, my daughter, and I strolled home together while holding hands. Her smile gave me more courage as she thanked me for standing up for her. I silently vowed to keep her safe at all times. The divorce from Benjamin went through without any problems, ending a long-term unhappy marriage. It ended abruptly, which surprised me and made me consider why I had put up with so much for so long. It turned out that Benjamin had borrowed a lot of money to finance his extramarital activities and had wasted a sizable sum of money on his affair. Eventually, his mistress walked out on him, unable to handle his unstable finances. Meanwhile, Benjamin experienced hurdles in his career. Due to a lack of materials, his company had to make layoffs. One of the first people let go from the factory was Benjamin. Even though it was regrettable for him, it was likely that Benjamin was among the employees let go by the company due to subpar work or behavior, which may have included his behavior at home. Benjamin, who was now unemployed, made ends meet by doing part-time jobs and didn't take the initiative to look for a full-time job. Having lost his wife, career, and lover, his life seemed hopeless. Benjamin had taken my sacrifices for granted, even though I'd gone to the lengths of donating a kidney to him in the past. It appeared that he was finally being dealt with by karma, therefore he should concentrate on paying off his debts. Using the resources I acquired from my in-laws, I ventured into illustration in the interim, turning a new leaf. Initially motivated by Nancy's compliments on my drawing abilities, I got encouraging responses from customers who appreciated how careful and proficient my work was. I want to keep working hard to give Nancy and myself a better life, and I also want to grow my clientele. This new chapter was a proactive move toward a prosperous future, as well as a healing from previous traumas.